My name is Jean-Yves Thériault. I'm a retired 23 times world kickboxing champion. I am about to do an interview with Hannibal TV and give you a tour of my facilities.
We are with 23-time world champion in kickboxing, Jean-Yves Thériault, and it's an honor to speak to him today for the Hannibal TV. And can you start off by telling us a little bit about your childhood?
Sure, of course. First, I'm really happy to help you guys out, and thank you for the honor. It's 23 or 24 years after I retired, people are still knocking at my door. That's kind of cool. I'm one of 6 boys. I was born in New Brunswick, Packentville, New Brunswick. My father at the time decided, I think we were 5 boys, 5 children at the time. My father decided that he needed to move out of New Brunswick in order to make a better living for himself. And so we moved to Thunder Bay, northern Ontario. And shortly after we got there, my father died. And of course, Mom, being left with 6 boys, because she was pregnant with one when my father passed away, she also decided that, if I'm going to take care of these boys, I'm going to have to go back to school. And so, actually, she was still studying. She finished her degree in the public nursing, and we moved to Ottawa, and she went to University of Ottawa. And during the time that she was studying, we were placed in foster homes. We were sometimes a couple of kids in the same foster home. Sometimes I was alone. Sometimes we were 3 together. And so that lasted for about 6 years. And would see Mom, every couple of months. She'd come and visit, working and studying. And 1967, we all got back together. Lived here in Ottawa, which was a bit of a shock, because I understood that I had brothers. I knew I had brothers. I always, yearned to see them and get to know them. But when we first met, it's like, who are you guys? It was kind of weird. And we, proceeded to get to know each other. And to this day, maybe we're sort of scattered, all over the city, and but we're superbly close. And yeah, really not regretting the years that we were in foster homes. I mean, you're a kid, you're a kid, you eat a couple of times a day, you go to school, you have people around you. The following year, they pluck you out of that one, put you into another one, but your immediate needs are met. And so, years later, you sort of understand that there may have been something missing. But for the time being, we're all very comfortable.
Now, for those that don't know, according to your book, you lived in Vanier, which is kind of the rough area of Ottawa. Did that kind of lead you at all into wanting to learn martial arts, because it's known for being a bit of a dangerous area?
No. I think main reason, if I can sort of pinpoint something, would be as a child, as a kid, young teenager, you probably are witness schoolyard fights and such, and it may have happened that way, and you're sort of exposed to that, and the first question that comes to mind is, what if it was me? How would I handle that? And I wasn't really very brave back then, and so a couple of, actually one of my brothers, Vic, was in Montreal, and he promotes in the kickboxing there. And a friend of mine, we decided that we would register at Thériault Jiu-Jitsu. Thériault Jiu-Jitsu, now it's Thériault Jiu-Jitsu Kickboxing, but back then it was Thériault Jiu-Jitsu. And that's where this very pleasant and successful journey started.
So did you kind of fall in love with martial arts right away when you started training, or is it something that developed over the years?
I did jiu-jitsu. I have a black belt in jiu-jitsu. I'm not very good at it, but I still earned it. And back then it was, physical expression. I mean, we're competitive kids. We measure ourselves against other kids. Martial arts was something new in our area. You know, the fact that I was in Vanier really didn't do anything to spur that on. I mean, for the most part, we're all very good kids, and certainly exposed to maybe the ones that are not so good, and you know, by association, you learn lessons. I don't want to do what these guys are doing, and so yeah, we were competitors among ourselves. I mean, 6 boys. There were fights until the day we started martial arts. We realized that if we're going to be training and learning how to strike properly and so on, I think it's probably better that we stop fighting amongst ourselves. And so yeah, so we continued. I did a stint. I went to yellow belt or orange belt. I stopped for a little while, and then I came back and I went to blue belt. And at that time, my manager, John Thériault, my instructor at the time, was approached by his instructor to get some athletes to experiment with a new sport, which was kickboxing. And we were probably 25 or 30 when we first started. And after a period of time, I was with another gentleman. I was the only one left. So I often think in terms of destiny that was just sort of unfolding itself in front of me. I don't really know where I'm going, but I like this. And you know, a very sort of focus. This is who I want to be. This is what I want to do. I was working, you know, all the distractions that can come around a sportsman, and I had a chance to fight, and I jumped on it, and you know, it was an extremely traumatizing experience at the beginning, because I really didn't understand what the requirement were as far as training properly. I was training and I thought I was in shape, but I wasn't in shape at all for fighting anyways. And so it was a bit of an awakening for me. Did the first fight. I managed to hang on for a round, and my opponent did not, so I won by default, I guess, or by technical knockout. And
that wasn't in a ring, right? That was
actually, no. The first time we fought, and a couple of times, the first few fights, we did it on stage. That one particularly was on a stage in one of the local high schools, and maybe a couple more after that. But then the ring was introduced, and that was also very sort of traumatizing. I mean, you know, you're caught here, and the only way out is to fight, and so there's a reality that sets in there. But yeah, I enjoyed it, and I realized that maybe because the first experience, my first fight, I decided I really want to get myself in shape and see what I can do, and then from that, it sort of it just became so important for me to become a good athlete. My medium was kickboxing. It could have been hockey in Canada, it could have been football, baseball, anything else. But as it stands, kickboxing, and I was at the eve of the sport, if you want. And so I don't have any difficulty in believing that the destiny was unfolding in front of me, and I was just following the course of my life, my designed life.
So how did you change your training up to prepare for your next fight?
Boy, I studied the English boxing team. I studied the Australian swim team, of all things. I just looked at what is required. Why are these people top in the world in their fields? And so I studied the regiment that they had, and it was evolving back then as well. I mean, but now it's you know, there's a little bit more scientific approach to a training regiment, and I may have been part in setting a little bit of a blueprint for that. I was interviewed by a sports psychologist here in Ottawa, and he was interested in finding out what happens at that level, what happens in your mind, and so on and so forth. So there's there was an evolution there that it just sort of a natural for me, and I just studied a lot more outside of my sport. I studied sports psychology. I studied the mechanics of the movement. The concept of speed and angles and endurance and all these things. I really wanted to know what I have to do in order to become the best athlete that I can be. And I was lucky enough to have some very good people around me. My trainer, Guy Mallet, rest his soul, he was a boxer. He showed me the finer points of boxing. And my trainer, not my trainer, but my manager, John Thériault, understood that his strength was to put me out there, get me the best possible fights, get me the best possible money, get me the most exposure. And I was really lucky to have a great team, absolutely lucky. I mean, it's a little bit like the iceberg. I'm the tip, and that's what people see. But underneath, I'll tell you what, now these people's big part, as important a part in my success as I was. I just get the whole attention, really.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, you talk about the ring being a little traumatizing and your first fight being a little overwhelming. What did you do to deal with nerves as time went on?
Well, I'll tell you, I think I have an innate sense of calming myself down and really, and I also sort of studied this and practiced this, but I think it may have been given to me, the ability to concentrate on one thing and one thing at a time. It doesn't really help at home, but in sports it did help me. What I'm doing is, this is what needs to be done right now. I have an hour and a half or 2 hour workout sessions. Nobody's going to come around me and distract me. My manager knew this. The only one permitted, not permitted, but that I would stop would be my mom. And my first hero, of course. But other than that, if some people came in for an interview, or some people were, traveling from across the world and they wanted, well, he's finished in a half hour, you can speak to him then. And so my focus, my determination, when you're resolved into doing it right, and I was anal about this stuff, really. Everything else just seems to fall. It's not important right now. It's not important. I'll pick it up later, and that's where my power of concentration was developed. My focus, my commitment. When you're committed to something, everything comes into play. Your focus, your ability to criticize yourself or to accept criticism. To see clearly the path of your career, if you want, what fight to take, when, against who, training properly, the hard day, easy day, the rest is superbly important, food is very important, nutrition is very important, and all these things, sometimes the athletes that are starting just don't look at it as an important fact. But I was a very average guy. Just made, in some people's mind, extraordinary career out of it, really, by being very conscious of what I did, or what am I getting into? I need to know. I don't go into something blindly or half-ass. I'm going to look at it first, and sometimes I think I miss opportunities, but when I do get in there, I know where I'm getting.
So for people watching this that have only seen the current kickboxing, where there's no shin guards and there's leg kicks, there's no minimum number of kicks, could you tell us a little bit about the rules at your peak?
Yeah, back then I think unfairly, I think, people may have seen Thai boxing with leg kicks and elbows and the real Thai boxing as a glorified street fight, and so it was sort of, you know, in the 70s, 78, 80, it was hard sell. So above the waist was a little bit more quote unquote acceptable, if you want, a little bit more boxer-like, a little bit more gentlemanly-like, and so, you know, I thought the marketing was done properly for the era afterwards, when people started understanding Thai boxing or low kick fights and stuff like that. This is just as honorable, if you want. And in the face of martial arts has changed a lot since I started, and so I think you know, one of the things that probably changed the most is people's awareness of what is out there and what they're attracted to. You know, Sambo is old, and BJJ is old as well, but back then nobody really knew about it, you know. And so through marketing and through crowd appeal, I think, you know, you do a commercial and you got a guy who's kicking straight up, and or one guy who's, you know, 3 or 4 kicks, pop, 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 like this. Wow, it's never been done, it's never been seen before. And so they marketed it properly. I don't know that they managed it properly, because after, you know, a good run, it just sort of went downhill, and it left a void for MMA or other sports. And so, yeah.
Do you have any memories of your fight with William Rodriguez?
I don't remember what I had for breakfast, so I don't know. Yeah, no, Blinky, good family fighters, you know, good fighting family. I mean, Benny and you know, the others, the ladies as well. A lot of boxers, a lot of wrestlers, a lot of kickboxers, and a great first family of fighting in those days. Fight was negotiated. We understood that it would be the PK version of it. That would be above the waist. And of course, when I got into the fight and I took the first kick in the leg, I understood that somebody didn't read the fine print, and I was left to my own device, and obviously I was knocked out. But again, I mean, it just, you know, it was a learning process for me, as well as my management and the people around me, is that when we do a contract, we have to be very, very specific. And so, yeah.
And when you fought Rick Rufus, he tried to pour a bucket of water on you before the fight. Was that something you weren't used to?
Well, no, I wasn't. I thought, you know, these people are stretching. We're fighting in Montreal. Montreal was an adopted city for me. You know, I'd been dominant fighter for a number of years, and a lot of very, very good fights happened in Montreal through Karate Mania. The efforts of Joe Corley, specifically, really a very fine gentleman. We managed to negotiate, you know, the time and what the fighters were going to get, and Rick applies himself pretty easily to these sort of shenanigans, and it just, you know, just lit up the crowd, really. I mean, a couple of weeks before, we were at a press conference, one of the local hotels, and he comes out and he throws some, you know, a bucket of ice on me and starts rambling on about this and that and the other, and you know, the following day the papers were just lit up with pictures and declarations of the war is coming and so on and so on. So he did what he had to do to sell the fight. We were fighting a 12-round fight. I knocked him down in the 4th or 5th round, and it's debatable. I think I may have been leading in the later part of the fight, until the later part of the fight, and for some reason, you know, my concentration was in an area where it shouldn't have been. I was waiting for a counterpunch. I was waiting because that's how I put him down.
Right.
And then I was just waiting for a counterpunch. And in the meantime, well, Rick is working. And Rick's a good athlete, Rick's a good warrior, and just working and working and, you know, sort of staying away because, you know, at the other end, there's a guy who can hit hard.
Yeah.
Rick, at that point, had knocked out Rob Kamen in the 1st or 2nd round. He knocked out McDonald. He knocked out a bunch of top athletes and top fighters. And of course, the understanding or the byline, and well, Thériault's old and he's ready to go, and so he probably maybe have underestimated me, and I was still there at the round 12. Didn't win, but and I you know, he understood at the time. I think he understood at the time he had a big fight in his hands, and I thought anyways during the evening he may have been a little bit more quiet than he maybe should have been. You know, time to win, you know, or not win, but it's time to celebrate a win, and I thought he may have been a little bit more low-key, but hey man, you won, it's what it is.
Now when you fought Rob Kamen, you had a vertebrae injury. Can you tell us about that fight?
I did. That was a pretty interesting experience. I was playing with my child a couple of weeks before, the day that I was leaving for Paris, and a very innocent turn. The child, my daughter, turned on her bicycle, and I sort of went over her to avoid falling on her, and fell on one leg, got my balance back and stuff. And then the following day, I'm taking the plane. I'm there for about 2 weeks. Getting off the plane, I couldn't get up. I couldn't get out of my seat. I could not walk with my feet together. I had to spread about 2 feet wide. I severely pinched the sciatic nerve, and it ran through my legs. And I looked for some relief through acupuncture, some manipulation, and it's sort of working. But when I first got into the fight, the first kick I threw, I felt everything go south. And I mean, that's not the right time to do in front of Rob Kamen. You know, great warrior. I think he'd been with some amazing fighters. I'm going to say something that I'm hoping will not offend him or anybody else. I think he may have been close to on the downhill part of his career. So had it not been for that, you know, the outcome would have been different for sure. But in the 5th round, I couldn't stand anymore, so I was declared the loser, and the French media just crucified me. And even though you have a legitimate excuse, you don't want to hear it. And that's fine. I mean, that's the way it went, and I accepted the whole consequence of my action. And I don't regret it. I mean, you can't really regret it. That's how it was designed, and that's what happened. Really. Great guy. Those Dutch fighters are tough. Ooh.
Yeah, why is it that Dutch fighters are so known for kickboxing? Is it just really popular there?
I think that they have maybe an ease to travel to Thailand and really get to understand the sport itself. Why in the Netherlands are they tougher than? At least that's my opinion. They're great than almost everybody. Yeah. All of them are very good fighters, and for a small country, it's amazing. I don't know how it is now. Probably not the same, but at the time they were. I'm sure they were one of the strengths of the powerhouses in the world in kickboxing.
What do you think about Boss Rutan? Have you seen him fight?
I saw him. You know, I did not see him fight so much as opposed to his after career. You know, being an actor and being a. I think he's. I'd like to meet him. I think he seems to be a very affable and very friendly and approachable guy. And fighters, as far as fighters, I mean, I saw a couple of tapes, of course, and very dominant and focused, and this is where I'm going, and nobody's getting in my way kind of guy. You gotta love that.
Now, you also went into some fights with wrist injuries. How did you continue training when you had wrist issues?
Well, I had, you know, not debilitating injuries. I did have that I had to cancel fights when I broke my hand, broke my wrist. I went into a fight with a broken wrist, and you know, we live with, you know, little pains every day. I mean, you're an athlete, you know what it is. And we're guys. How dumb is that? we make decisions that may not be the right ones, but small little injuries, yeah, it'll go away. It'll go away. And of course, after almost every fight, I would go to the doctors to get a checkup. Even though the fight would finish in the first round, second round, my training was 6 weeks, 6 or 8 weeks. And I always went to see if there was any damage or anything that I need to know, and so on. And so after one fight, and after a while, I decided, after 6 months, I decided this wrist is not getting any better. And so I went to the doctors, and he told me you had a break, you had a fracture there. And okay, well, let's do something about it now. And you know, yeah.
The Narvaez fight. In your book, it was said that the deck was stacked against you. Could you go into the details of that?
Yeah, Emilio Narvaez, a good fighter again. You know, in the year he fought Bill Wallace, who was the reigning champion, and he brought him into the 12th round. And it was a good fight. I mean, he's a good kicker. I think back then a lot of the fighters may have wrongfully, in my mind, understood that we need to go the champion's route, and Bill Wallace, a great kicker, obviously, superfoot, and Narvaez was also a very good kicker. And there's a lot of fighters at the time that were working on kicks more than they were working on punches or boxing. And I fought Emilio Narvaez two times. I fought him in Kitchener, Ontario, and I knocked him out in the 7th round. And they sort of believe that the referee called it a little early. You know, that's the opinion of a lot of fighters when they're a little groggy. And then I fought him again in Boston, and I knocked him out in the 7th round as well. And that was an elimination fight to go to the World Championship. Bill Wallace had retired, and the organization decided that the first 4 would fight an elimination. I fought Narvaez, Wilson fought Batiste, and Wilson won against Batiste, and I won against Narvaez, but for some reason the fight was not, the promoters then bid for the right to do the fights in cities, right? And we won the bid here. My management won the bid here, and I think that Don was not ready to come up to Canada to fight for the World Championship. So they put me against the person that he won against, which was Rodney Batiste. That was my first defense.
And when you won, it was against Robert Biggs, right?
Robert Biggs,
Ottawa Civic Center.
Yeah.
I guess that would have probably been the biggest fight you'd had at that point for the world title in your hometown. Certainly,
most important fight in my career then. It was the first time for the World Championship. Robert Biggs was the last fighter who fought Bill Wallace, so he was given a chance to a crack at the World Championship first. And because I won that elimination thing, he came up here, fought. I threw a kick. He ducked. I hit him high on my shin and opened up a serious gash in his forehead, and the fight was stopped then. Which I suppose a bit of a anticlimactic. You fight, you fight for years and years. You prepare months and months for something like this, and it finishes in the first round. There has to be something else. And my first defense was against Rodney Batiste, and that was the something else. He's a great fighter. He's a great guy. We communicate periodically. We communicate, and most of the fighters that I met, I'd really love at one point just to sit and talk with them and see how they're doing, and how did they remember our meetings and stuff like that. It'd be cool.
Now, for that fight, it states in your book that you made $15,000 and Batiste only made $150. How is that possible?
Well, that would be wrong.
Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know who the management was at the time, and no. It was closer to what I got.
Okay.
Absolutely. And that's a nice rumor. You can ask him, but I seriously doubt that was it.
Now, for performing in front of thousands of people at the Ottawa Civic Centre, which was the major arena in town at the time, what was that feeling like, and did you start to be recognized as a star athlete more after that?
Yes. And obviously, some of the merchants around here wanted to hook their wagon on mine. That's the business of sports. You get recognized, and it's funny at the beginning. You don't really sort of know that people are looking at you, and they're going like this. It's like something's weird going around here. And after a while, you certainly understand the dynamics. And at the beginning, you're a little bit awkward. I was, anyways, a little bit awkward with that quote unquote fame. Nothing that I really asked for nor desired, to tell you the truth. But it comes along with the job, and after a while you sort of understand that we do have a responsibility now. These people were kind enough to recognize you and cheer for you or whatever, and so I turn to them, I smile, and they come and either they come and they talk to me, or they smile back and wave, and they're off on their way. And so it still happens, a lot less now, but my trainer once told me, he said, you know what, your way up is going to be very, very gratifying and satisfying and nice, and your way down can be rough if you're not nice on your way up. So I was nice.
Yeah. Now, in your book, I know you weren't part of these, but it discusses that in Hull in the 70s, there were some boxer versus martial artist matches, which I guess is like the prelude to MMA in a way. Yeah. What is your recollection of those fights?
Well, I mean, matching one sport against another, I mean, we've seen this for, decades and decades. We'll remember Ali and Nanuki. We'll remember, Gene LaBelle and some of the boxers. We'll remember some of these guys that did fight in another sport. When I first started fighting, we had a bunch of people in our school that were my sparring partners, who were my buddies. We would spar together, and after a while, I mean, I was going forward because I wanted to go forward and get better, and these guys may have understood that I have something else to do. And for the time that they were with me, God bless them, they were very, very helpful. I was blessed again being part of a Thériault organization. So my trainer, who was a boxer, decided to communicate with boxing coaches in Hull, who's now Gatineau, and arrange boxing sessions. And so I went out there, and the first time, I mean, I'm skinny white guy and sort of unassuming, and I don't make a whole lot of noise, and in that particular group of boxers, the mentality was, we'll show him. I don't mean to say that it's like that with boxers all the time, but in that particular time, that group they all sort of wanted a piece of me, and because I became champion, Canadian champion, and I was looking for better sparring partners, and so they lined up, and I was not sparring, I was fighting, which was great. Because I now understand that I can measure myself against quote-unquote experts. I mean, boxing being a sport of hands, I sort of had to take stock on where I sit with reasonably good boxers. First day there were 6, second day there were 3, and the third time there was 1. And so I fared proper. I fared, well enough. I measured myself, but like I said, I had to fight. It wasn't sparring; it was fighting, and I don't know if you know, but I hit hard.
And you did actually have one boxing. I think it was an exhibition match against Murray Sutherland at one point.
Actually, no. It was not an exhibition match. It was a real fight. My second fight, and. Remember the first fight that I didn't know how to train?
Yeah.
And the second fight I thought I knew how to train? I still didn't know how to train.
Oh, okay.
I was training better than I did for the first fight. I was running, I was doing, complementary work to my workout. But I met Murray, and Murray at the time had a bunch of boxing fights and a very good boxer. In fact, became, I think it was middleweight world champion in boxing. He's a very good boxer. Cool guy as well. Anyways, it's a good thing that he hit me high in the forehead or high in the face, because had he hit me in the chin, he would have knocked me out. Right. But he hit me high and he cut me, and the fight was over because of the cut. And he after a while he was living in Hamilton, I think, and he moved to the United States, and he became world middleweight champion. He was a very good boxer, yeah.
And I guess you fought another boxer, but in a kickboxing match, Ralph Follet, I think, and you ended up knocking him out.
Yeah, I fought him twice. I fought him here in Ottawa. I knocked him out in the 5th round. And then I fought him in Halifax. And I didn't have that great of a night. I think I suffered food poisoning during the daytime. And so I wasn't really not very much into the fight, if you want, and that didn't go well for me.
What was your typical meal that you'd have before a fight?
A lot of pasta. Yeah, I remember my trainer Guy would, old school, steak and potatoes. I understood that the potato had great nutritional value, the steak as well, but not necessarily turning into, the energy that I needed. So he would certainly recommend that, but I'd sneak away and go and have dinner with my mom, and she'd prepare me a big lasagna. And shortly after, the carbs just sort of set in, and I would be dozy for a little while. So I got into the habit of having a bit of a nap after because I ate at maybe 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I would fight at 10, and in the afternoon I could take a nap. But I could turn that into some immediate, fuel.
And that was, I guess, the days before protein became popular and all these pre-workout supplements. I'm guessing you wouldn't have any energy supplements or anything before?
No. I ate, and again, that was part of my preparation. I have to make sure that my body digested the food properly so that I can perform. There's not a lot of blood going to my digestive system. It's all going into my arms and legs in order to perform, right? Right. And so I took a lot of time, maybe 8 to 10 hours before I fought on an empty stomach, and it just served me well.
Now, according to your book, for anyone who doesn't know, it's called Kickboxing Legend Jean-Yves Thériault, the Iceman, by Perry William Kelly. Mm-hmm. They talked that you had a 1987 movie proposal for a movie that Diane Keaton was possibly also in talks to be involved. They were
talking over the course of my tenure as champion. A lot of proposals came our way, and there may have been a movie a couple of times, and so I'm not finished fighting. That was my mentality then. I really want to focus on, you know, finish my career, and maybe at the end of my career I could have probably went in that direction, but I was in the full flight, and this is what I'm doing right now, and you know, come back later. But obviously people don't do that in that business.
Chuck Norris was one guy that definitely got into the Hollywood side of things. Did you have much contact with Chuck?
I met him a couple of times. Very cool guy. You know, what you see, maybe not his acting, his movies, or his TV show, but as an individual with interviews and such, he's a very nice man. I mean, there's not a lot of people in martial arts or traditional martial arts that I met that are not nice. Really, I met a few assholes in other sports, but in martial arts, I'll tell you, I don't really remember meeting those kind of people.
And you mentioned Bill Superfoot Wallace before. That was the one fight that everyone wanted to see at the time, you against him. Was that just contract issues and where the fight would be promoted? Or?
You know, Bill was planning on retirement. I was coming up. There was talk about him and I going for an actual fight, and you know, the negotiation back and forth just didn't happen. I mean, you know, without going into details, nobody's fault, not his, not ours. It's just we're not meeting the contract requirements, so it's not going to happen.
Now, this is another name I'm probably not going to get correct.
I'm gonna stop you there just for a second. I think at the time, this is my own personal view, and you know, some of the people that are in my corner probably would say something different. But at that time, I'm not sure that I could have beat him. He was a very good fighter. He was a very smart fighter. The Thériault 5 years later, no doubt. But at the time, not sure. Yeah.
He was still developing.
He was a good fighter. He was a smart fighter. He's also a smart guy as well. Yeah.
Now, it says in your book that you said your toughest opponent was Danny MacCarthy.
Danny MacCarthy, yeah, Rhode Island. Danny was a world light heavyweight champion. He had beaten a number of superbly good fighters. And he was a tough guy. Probably still is. And he also had maybe 18 or 20 boxing matches as well. And one of his, maybe not consciously, one of his tactics was to get the guy tired by sort of, you know, a little bit more give and take. I like to give. He took a little bit more than maybe you should have. Anyways, after 5 or 6 rounds, guys would get tired and he'd start working and he'd win. And he was a very good, very tough fighter as well. And I managed to knock him down in the first round, and knocked him down a couple of times over the course of 10 fights. And you gotta love a guy like that. We fought 10 hard rounds. I had this string of victories, fast victories prior to this fight, and one of the local reporters said, "Looked like you carried him." I thought after all these years of following me, and you think that I carried him, that's you know, to some degree that's insulting, because this guy is tough. Anyways, after the fight, Danny came to me, and you know, his face was busted up, and his tongue was like 1.5 inches thick, and and he said, "You know, after me, Thériault, you're the toughest." I said, "Cheers to you, buddy." You gotta be a fighter to say something like that.
You would come out to the 2001 Space Odyssey theme for your fights. Was that your choice or your management?
I don't know how that started, I'll tell you. It seems that the build-up, you know, whoever designed it, the build-up of that song just sort of starts out and it gets people's ears going, and then you know, blah, 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 and it just sort of didn't do much for me, to tell you the truth. I mean, I'm going there to fight. I just got used to the song, and I got into the whole game. You know, I go, you know, the crowd is going up, and I sense it, but my focus is still on the ring. I go along with it. You know, some people will recognize, some people in my circle will recognize if there's a song or anything close to that, they'll look at me and they're seeing if my hands are coming up. But it was the appropriate one, I think.
And there's a picture in your book of you and Hulk Hogan. How did that meeting come about?
Well, fighting in Montreal, great fight city, great sport city, really. And a lot of these fighters, wrestlers, some of them were local, and so I would meet them at the training areas. There was a center where these guys would go and lift weights and train in the afternoon before their match, and I would go there and meet them. And again, you know, some of them were great, and the others were a bit of a mystery to this day. They were all very, very nice and very accepting and very gracious in meeting me, and but and again, I don't know if it was their character or if it was them. That would be a little off the wall, if you want.
Now, you were involved in the biggest profit to date for any full contact karate fight in '84 when you fought Don the Dragon Wilson at the Verdun Auditorium. Any memories of that match?
A lot of them. Some of them good, some of them great, some of them sort of, you come to an understanding and realization after a while. You face the truth, what happened and stuff. So the fight was, to some degree, politicized too much, certainly more than I would have wanted, because you know, PKA was sort of standing up, and we have our man, and WKA was, well, we have our man, and so they were getting their stuff up, and I didn't think that was cool, but marketing is what it is, right? And Don's a good fighter, very smart, great man too. I mean, we hired him for seminars here years after we fought, and very good guy. What happened, I think, with this, you know, the political twist on things, it affected me, and I think that Don may have played his psychological warfare more than I understood at the time, and I may have gotten into the whole sort of importance of this. Before me, a fight is a fight. This guy, that guy, this doesn't matter. It's not more important one than the other. That's how it was for me. And when it came time to fight Don, a couple of his actions with the promoter, going back and forth with the promoter, anyways, I inadvertently got involved in that his energy. And so I think that I lost a psychological war there. And when I got into the fight, I remember there are 3 steps to go into the ring, and I took a deep breath before I started going up, because I was exhausted. I trained too much. And God bless him. I mean, that's what he did to me. He got me out of my game. And I was in very good shape, and I was stubborn enough to go 12 rounds. I knocked him down, I think, in the 9th round. Just recently on Facebook, somebody mentioned they may have shown, I think they showed the fight, and obviously people are still commenting and who won and who lost and who won and who lost, and there are people that say, well, it's maybe not right to declare a winner at this point, and there's one that said, and I will be completely forthright and say that I don't think I would have liked to win this fight. It came out as a draw, but I don't know that I would have liked to win that fight.
How important is the psychological warfare aspect of fighting?
It's an unknown entity for most fighters. I patched into that maybe with 35, 40 fights, and I started realizing that people would either believe what they were reading in the newspaper, or believe or jump on the energy in a press conference, or they would get their stuff up, and I started playing with that with some of the fighters about you know, one day it'd be very nice when I met them, and the following day I wouldn't even talk to them or listen. When they came to me, I would turn away, and just playing with their minds. And I would sometimes, when I would go back into the fight, facing each other, they didn't really know what to do with me. They were still thinking about those instances. We're fighting in a fucking minute. Never mind, you know, 20 days ago, right now. And I could see that they were confused. And you know, that was my sort of tactic. That's how sort of I sort of approached you know, the psychology of the whole thing within ourselves is entirely different. But one against the other is part of the fight game. A lot of people just don't know that, and you gain, you know, an extra ace for sure.
And you had several fights overseas in Europe. What did you think about fighting over there compared to Canada and the U.S.?
I liked it. I liked it a lot. I fought Europeans, of course, when I was in Europe, and I thought, contrary to what I may have been told early, certainly when I was in the United States, that the Europeans may have been, you know, years behind us. And I went there and I noticed for myself that they were not behind us at all. Technically, they were very good. They're just as good as any American or Canadian, anybody else for that matter. What I found was that they may not have had the same doggedness. You're not ready to really go down into the trenches when you're fighting. You're not a fighter, not in my mind anyways. And so some of those guys would sort of fold faster than they should. But technically, some of the best fighters I've seen, really. And obviously over the course of the years it just changed. I mean, they may have understood that you have to start being, you know, find a dark spot on your soul. If you're going to fight, you're fighting. It's not just playing here. I'm going to fight. I don't want to be here all day, man. If I can take you out with one punch, you're going. I'm not getting paid by the hour. I'm a contract hitter.
Yeah. Now, speaking of fight pay, in your book it says you were offered numerous large amounts of money to box one match, apparently up to $300,000. Is there any reason particularly why you turned those down?
Yeah. The money was interesting. I was still fighting. That particular fight was against one of the Hilton boys, a boxing family in Montreal, very dominant. Two of them became champion of the world. Or at least one, Matthew. And the other one's not so successful. But in the event, the Montreal promoter, the boxing promoter, offered me, and they came here to Ottawa, and we sat down and said, well, we can do this. We can offer you this much money. And there's a couple of people that came from Montreal to offer me make those offers, and then we started negotiating, and they had me going down to 163 pounds or something, because Matthew was 160 or something like that. I was just under 4% body fat at 171 pounds. I'll be dead for a week, and I won't make the 163 cutoff.
Right.
You know, so that was one of the big issues. I can't make that weight, and they weren't ready to find a catch weight. I could have done maybe 68, but lower than that, never. So that was good money, and then I was offered some money after when I retired, some interesting money after into retirement, and no, I mean I'm done. I also understood when I'm going to retire, it'll be that's it. I fought until I was 41. I was seeing some slight differences. I could have fought more. I mean, Don Wilson fought until he was 50. I don't want to compare myself to him, but if I took myself seriously and kept myself in good shape, and maybe I'm sure I could have gone another 4 or 5 years. But when I did retire, I thought about it maybe a year before I retired. You got to understand what you're doing here. Your life is going to change completely. And I made the decision. That was it. And some people came back with some pretty interesting offers. And see, I'm not. I can't. You know, it's probably hard for people to understand. I don't fight for money. I fight for fighting. I fight for the need that I have inside me. The need to measure myself, the need to push myself as far as I can. However it is, the money will be taken care of by my management. I don't do this for money. You know, John would come to me and say, well, you're getting so much against this guy. Okay, now I don't need details. That's it, that's all. I say yes or I say no. He would have accepted either one or the other. I mean, out of professional courtesy, he gave me the last word, because it's my career, right? But either I accept it or I don't, and very rarely that I didn't accept it. I always fought as many times as I could.
And you had a pretty brutal blood cut stoppage against Eddie Durant at the Civic Center Salons. Any memories of that fight?
Yeah. South Carolina, a young man, brash. I remember one of our students was assigned to go and pick him up at the airport, and he was asking. We talked about that maybe about 3 or 4 months ago with my friend, and he said, I remember the conversation in the car about Durant asking me, "Is it really true that Thériault hits really hard and stuff?" And, yeah, well, you'll see, you'll see, and so he came at me hard and fast, and I think there may have been either hopes of getting an early knockout, or maybe a lack of experience. I'm not sure, but he just walked into some punches, and I cut him on top of the right eye, on top of the left eye, underneath both eyes, and yeah, I mean he was cut. And you know, me personally, those things really don't bother me, because I'm there, I'm fighting, whatever happens, happens. Afterwards, like many other fighters, I'm sure afterwards, Jesus, that's really, you know, in your sort of maybe subconscious, maybe your conscious world as well, that's really not how I want to finish a fight. You know, I want to, you know, technically outpoint him, or maybe knock him out, but cut him up like that. But those are very, very brief moments. It's done, it's what it is.
And you had a series of fights against Kerry Roops.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that series?
Yeah, Kerry Roop, yeah, good fighter, world champion. I fought him 3 times. I fought him in Detroit. I fought him in Detroit, and I won a 5-round decision there. And then I fought him here in Ottawa, and I knocked him out in round 5. And then I fought him again in Montreal. At the time, he was briefly or shortly before our fight, he'd become champion of the world in the light heavyweights or the heavyweights. He fought Joe Louis, and he won against Joe Louis and then became champion. And I knocked him out in the 7th round. I remember shortly before that fight, a young Korean fighter was killed in the ring, and I remember Kerry having his daughters, one or many, I'm not exactly sure, there were some children of his in the corner, and I was doing my work, and I at one point heard the little girl say, "That's enough, Daddy." That's serious shit. And I knocked him out, but you know, all these things come to mind when what am I doing in this world? You know, what am I doing here? That's what I was put here to do. So you know.
What do you think about fighters that bring their small children? Because you see that in the audience all the time, where some kids, even when their dad wins, they're crying in the crowd.
I'm not comfortable with it. My oldest was 14, I think, when 12 or 13 when I last fought, and she often would say she would have liked to see me fight, but I refused to have them there. It's not for the fight, because they understood this is a sport. Daddy may get hurt, maybe the other guy's going to get hurt, but I'll tell you honestly, the crowd. People get into it, and they'll say things that are just not cool. There are racist comments that I personally, I was ashamed to hear, and profanity and stuff like that. At the time, I didn't want to expose my children to that. I never did, and never did do that. And if they did, well, they did it on their own. It wasn't for me. But I'm not comfortable with that at all. But that's a choice.
With all the betting involved in combat sports, were you ever approached or have any dealings with anyone trying to give you a bribe or try and threaten you?
Not directly, no. No.
I guess something like that would really weigh on you going into a fight, even if it's indirectly.
Yeah, no, I like I say, and I said it earlier, I don't fight for money, and I wouldn't have done anything for money, certainly not that. People will say, man, there's a price. There's a price. Yeah, everybody's got a price. I think I would have quit the sport before. Yeah.
And you talked about earlier in this interview a little bit about the government and also off-camera interfering in kickboxing, and it seems like they really did ultimately kill the sport compared to what it was when you were at your peak in popularity. Could you just talk about what they did a little bit? Well,
there's, we're riding a really very important popularity wave, and there's a lot of people business people that are making efforts to push this forward so that they can also profit from it, and and when the ban was implemented in 1980, it's sort of, certainly in Ontario here, it's sort of, we had a business plan design. We were on a tour. We were going on a tour of fight across the country, and a lot of fights, and it would have turned into some pretty interesting money, and that's just stopped right in its tracks. And shortly thereafter, we wound up in Quebec, in Montreal, which is a great fight city, the best fight city in the country, really. And that was something that was bad turned to something that was good. But government will do what they think is right, whether they know what they're doing or not. We are certainly exposed to that in these times. There are things that I think, and a lot of people think, should not be done, either out of moral value or economically, but it's being done anyway. So.
You already spoke a bit about why you decided to retire, but could you talk about the fight itself against Marcus Reeves in Montreal that night?
Yeah, the decision was made to retire, in my mind, well in advance, maybe a year before. In fact, my medical team was far-reaching. A medical doctor for my license, a nutritionist. I also had a sports psychologist with me, but maybe for other reasons at the time. And I remember speaking with him, and I really enjoyed spending some time with him because he would direct me to the answer. These people are good. The ones that are good, they'll direct you, because we should know the answer to this, and you come to the conclusion that I'm not a fighter. I'm a man, I'm a husband, I'm a brother, I'm a son, and I choose to fight. And I have much more to offer than just fighting. And that was the conclusion of that particular session and the catalyst that made me accept, okay, we have a limited time now, we'll go into, and then we planned it, and that particular fight, Marcus Reed, that was my first fight as a light heavyweight for the World Championship. I won it and I gave it away that night. That was a retirement fight. And about a year following that, I certainly questioned my decision, but always came to the same conclusion. We thought about this is going to happen. And over that year, some of those offers were coming in for big money, and it's not happening.
It says in your book your highest paid fight was $150,000. Is anybody making that in Canada in this day and age for kickboxing?
No, not even close. No, not even close. That was the era. That was the heyday of kickboxing. You know, $150,000 is a lot of money, and but then, you know, people will inevitably compare, and they're comparing what you know, another French Canadian is doing, a couple of $1 million a fight, Georges St-Pierre, and well, that was, you know, that was the era, and what he's doing is something different. It was marketed completely differently back then as it is now, and you know, like I say, it's unfair to compare, but you know, the sport business being what it is, it's what it is. I mean, MMA is way more popular than in kickboxing ever was, because of the TV shows, the elimination. What is it called?
The Ultimate Fighter. The
Ultimate Fighter. There's MMA fights at one point. There's MMA fights every week on TV, 2-3 times a week on TV for years, and so even people who have no interest in fighting are exposed to this, you know. And so I think it was a genius way of marketing the sport, and you know, God bless them.
I'm sure a lot of people watching this are going to want to know your opinion of GSP.
Yeah, I like the guy. Yeah, he's a very good man. He sort of came up in the same sort of, maybe not, you know, he's been with his parents, but I remember him telling me about him and his father coming to the arenas to see me fight, which was coming from him. It was nice. We met first time here. He did a seminar here in Ottawa, and we met, and it was very gracious, very nice, and met a couple of times. I did a little bit of pad work with him in Montreal one time. I was driving through, and I stopped to see my brother, and he was with George, and so I did a little bit of pads, and he was interested in seeing, oh, I never saw this, or I never did this, and this and that. So that was an interesting meeting. I also did a TV show, 25 years of d'émotion, of emotions, I think in March last year, and he saw it, and he called me and said, man, I was impressed by you know, the way that your career went, and the way that you came to understand the retirement point is now. And you know, he gave me a bit of a flicker of the hat, and it was very kind of him. I mean, periodically I'll send him a, hey George, how are you, and he answers right away, and says, you know, he's immensely busy, and so I find I'm quite lucky that he responds that way, and is very respectful.
Now it says sometimes that he's going to retire, and now there's talk he might come back again. He already came back for one fight and won. He is much younger than you were when you retired, but what's your thoughts as someone who retired and stayed retired? Do you think he should come back or remain retired?
That's a tough one to decide to answer. Me personally, I think with his redemption fight with Bisping, he sealed, you know, he sealed his fate. Really, he sealed his legacy. He's got a lot of things happening. He's a good-looking guy. He's a smart guy. He's easy to coach. He can learn stuff. He can a couple of different directions that he can go in. He's got the money that he needs. But a fighter will fight. Whether in this day and age, in his sport, can he still compete with the young fighters that are coming up? The young George St. Pierres that are coming up? Is there going to be another George St. Pierre? Anybody close to being dominant like he was? Who knows? And if there is, will he be able to, you know, dance with this guy or not? So, fighter will fight, and if there's a need, I mean, he's a smart guy. And hopefully, that he's got some smart people around him, and I'm thinking yes, that will advise him. You know.
Now, we do professional wrestling interviews, and we interviewed a former kickboxer that went on to be a manager, Sonny Ono, last week. I don't know if you remember him. He was a PK bantamweight.
Yeah.
He spoke highly of you. But
thank you.
Now, of course, we're in your dojo. You're going to give us a tour, which we're going to play at the end of this. But do you want to talk a little bit about what you're doing now, and if anyone that lives in the area or wants to travel to come train with you for a while, how they can do that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we get people from all over the world coming to our school, coming to our city, to our school. We have a great organization with the Thériault organization and World Kubudo Federation, and people come from all over the world, come and train with us. This venue that you see here, I'm lucky enough to share it with a karate school, Iceman Budo Center, Mike Civic, and we share the place, and we get along very nicely. And Mike does traditional karate, and we do jiu-jitsu, we do kickboxing, and we also have a strength and conditioning program, and an amazingly good coach in Greg Polak. And so if you guys want to walk around, we'll show you what it is.
And do you have, I know you have a website, but I don't know it offhand, if people want to check out the website for more information.
Yeah, well, they can go at info@terrienottawasouth.ca and contact me through that, info@terrienottawasouth.ca.
And I know you have a Facebook page, which is your name. Do you have Twitter or any other social media?
For now, I'm just going with Facebook. I'm not a big, not that I'm an advocate of social media. Of course, I think that's a great medium, but there's a lot of shit that's on there that I just don't want to know. And so I keep it professional. My private life is my private life, and I have no interest in sharing that except with the people that I love. Simple as that.
And I noticed in researching this interview, you have a YouTube channel with a lot of your old fights and interviews posted on there. Anyone listening to this can just look it up. It's under your name as well. People just have to go. I mean, just Google me. And your brother is a kickboxing promoter now for amateur events in Montreal. Do you want to just let us know how people can find out more about his events?
Yes, Vic in Montreal. He does amateurs, but he also went into some pros to sort of circumvent the laws that were preventing kickboxing and some other sports in the country for the last year and a half. Everything's now rectified, and Vic at the time did a little bit of professional fighting, promoting I should say, and now he does pro-ams, and Promotion Victor Thériault, PVT Vic Thériault.
And to close this off, is there any message you want to say to the people watching this, which is obviously your fans?
Yeah, well, thank you for the support over the years, and for the young fighters who are interested in fighting, make sure that you know what you're getting into. Enjoy. Jean-Yves Thériault, welcome to my school. Come in. As you can see, this is the reception area. This is where we greet our students, of course. And we have a television widescreen where we show the back room where the children are playing. Because normally we don't let the parents walk around on the floor, so they can stay in the reception area and watch their kids on TV. this here particular space is my ring, my office. I get my best negotiations done in here. And obviously we do jiu-jitsu here. We have a large mat area where we do the traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu. We do some work on the ground as well as on BJJ, but our specialty is Japanese jiu-jitsu. We also do the kickboxing there as well. You'll notice that there's plenty of room. We don't have hanging equipment like heavy bags and such like. We do a little bit more pad work, do a lot of aerobic stuff. We do some fighting, of course, some sparring. And one of the other areas, or one of the other rooms that I have here is a strength and conditioning room, where some of our athletes will work in preparation for combat. It's reasonably well equipped. Everything that we really need, and the most important part of this room is the guy that's sitting in the back over there. His name is Greg Tolar, and he leads Gladiator Strength and Conditioning here in Ottawa. He takes care of preparing some of the athletes for their strength, their explosiveness, some of the agility. Of course, we take care of the rest.
And for people that want more information on it, where can they go again?
Well, you can contact us at info@ottawasouth.ca or at Strength and Conditioning, Greg, Gladiator?
Gladiatortraining.ca.
Gladiatortraining.ca.
And where did you get the name the Iceman? We forgot to mention that.
Well, actually, I fought Rodney Batiste twice, and the first time I fought him was here in Ottawa, and that was my first title defense, as I mentioned. And we went 12 rounds, and he hit me, and I hit him, and apparently I hit him more than he did. And the following day, and I won that fight, a decision. And the following day in the newspaper, having done the interview the night before, Rodney Batiste was asked about our local champion, and what do you think of our local champion? He said, well, you know, when we fight, oftentimes when you hit somebody, you will see reaction. When you hit him in the body, you'll either hear something or see something, or you hit him in the head, and same thing. He said, I was hitting Thériault and there was no reaction. It was like an Iceman. And it came out like that. The following day in the front page, the Iceman coming. And so I was born.